Hey, when it comes to algebra, we've got this thing called cancelling out that we can use when we are dividing things that have letters in them when we're working with algebra. Let's look at some examples. That might be the easiest way. But before we do, we need to remember that a fraction just simply means divide. Okay, so 3 over x simply means 3 divided by x. Okay, so it's the same with any fraction. A half, 1 over 2, means 1 divided by 2. So we're actually talking about dividing in algebra, but there's some things we can and can't do when it comes to cancelling out. Okay, and vice versa. All right, 3 divided by x could be written as 3 over x. Now, 6x divided by 3, I could write as a fraction, 6x over 3. Now, I happen to know that that can also be written as 2x. What gives? How come that works? Well, the answer is through the magic of cancelling out. So let's look at how it's done. First of all, here's a statement for you, and I'm going to explain it. You can only cancel common factors, not terms. Now, hold on to that thought. Let's look at an example and see what I mean by this. If I gave you the fraction 8 over 2, that means 8 divided by 2, we know the answer is 4. I could also take this 8 and I could write it as 2 times 4 because 2 times 4 is the same thing. In other words, I've written it as its factors. The factors 2 and 4, the numbers 2 and 4 are both factors of 8. Now the reason I've done that is I've also got a 2 on the bottom. And I gave you this rule that says you can cancel out common factors. So I can actually cancel out the 2 on the top and the bottom, because they're common factors. And what I'm left with is my answer, 4. Okay, so I've just proved to you that 8 divided by 2 equals 4. But what if I took the number 8 and instead of writing it as 2 times 4, what if I wrote it as 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2? Now that's still equal to 8, but I've no longer written it as factors, I've written it as terms. Because remember in algebra, whenever there's a plus or a minus sign, it represents the start of a new term or a piece of an algebraic expression. So that's what I've done here. I've broken it into its terms. Now let's see, if I was to cancel out one of those from the top and one from the bottom, my answer now is 6. Now we all know that 8 divided by 2 is not 6, so you cannot do it that way. You cannot cancel if there's a plus and minus sign as easily. You can do it, but you've got to be careful. There's some tricks that we'll look at in a future video. So how does this affect my algebra? I've got this fraction here, 6x over 2, which I know is just 6x divided by 2. I'm going to take the 6, I'm going to break it into some factors. I'm going to break it into its factors of 2 and 3. So now 6x could be written as 2 times 3 times x, because that's what 6x means. Remember, it's 6 times x. But I've just written the 6 as 2 times 3. Now, because there are no plus or minus signs here, I'm safe to go ahead and cancel out these 2's. And what I'm left with after I cross them out is 3x. So 6x over 2 equals 3x. I can use my cancelling out to get it down. Now, having a look at this one is a similar idea, probably a little bit trickier because we're going to do some factors on the top and the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to take my 8. I can see that the number 4 fits into both 8 and it fits into 20. So I'm going to rewrite the top, the 8 times x, as 4 times 2 times x. And I'm going to take my 20, I'm going to write as 4 times 5. And the reason I do that is now I can see that the 4 is a common factor on the top and the bottom. So when I cross it out, what I'm left with on the top is 2 times x, and what I've left with on the bottom is 5. So I've simplified this fraction down to this. Let's do one last example. Now, this one's a little bit trickier. I've got 3x on the top, x squared on the bottom. Now remember, 3x means 3 times x. X squared means x times x. Because there's no plus or minus signs, I'm free to go ahead and cancel out anything that's common, and I can cancel out the x's. If I have a look there, I've got common factors of x. So what I'm left with is 3 on the top, x on the bottom. Now I know there was a bit in that, but hopefully you just remember that really important rule. You can cancel out common factors, but if there's plus or minus signs, beware. You can't just go and cross things off without sort of thinking too much about what you're doing. All right, good job. Well done.